Hey guys, Icy Cat here. It's time to do our next operator profile for the newest attacker in the series, HIBANA. If you want to know all about how her gadget works, her strengths, weaknesses, and best ways to use her, then stick around as I talk about it next. HIBANA is the newest addition to the game. She is an attacker for the Japanese SAT counterterrorism unit. HIBANA is a 3-speed, but a 1 armor. That means she's fast and light, but she can't take a lot of hits. Let's take a look at what her loadout brings to the table. Her first primary weapon will be the Type 89 assault rifle. It has a fairly average rating of 41 for damage. Its fire rate is a bit on the moderate side at 850 as well, but it has a real handicap at a low magazine capacity of only 20 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. It's not necessarily bad, but it isn't very impressive either. Her alternate primary is the Benelli Supernova. This is a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, and this thing is a beast for making holes in walls. It does 32 on damage and a 7 shell capacity. Keep in mind that since it's a pump action, it'll cycle a lot more slowly than the other semi-auto shotguns in the game. Between the two primaries, I'm going to recommend the assault rifle hands down. Now let's take a look at her secondaries. Her first choice is the SIG P229. This has pretty decent damage and mobility at 50 with a carrying capacity of 12 rounds. And while its 50 damage is pretty respectable, I'm still going to give the edge to the Bearing 9 submachine gun as a secondary weapon. It has a much lower 32 damage, but a fire rate of 1100 with a mobility of 50 and a capacity of 25 in the mag plus 1 in the chamber. I'll take a little bit of that damage reduction in exchange for a very high rate of fire. Secondary gadget options are stun grenade or claymore. There's no wrong choice here, it's really dependent on your kind of playstyle. Now let's talk about HIBANA's primary gadget, the X-Kairos launcher. This shoots out these discs that will detonate on a reinforced wall, and you can put out 3 of these at a time if you want. When combined with somebody like Thermite, you have the ability to punch through a lot of walls at once. I mean, take a look at this. You can set them all off at once, so you can synchronize it, set them off simultaneously, and pair it with Thermite, and take a look at the destruction that happens all at once to the defensive team on these reinforced walls. If you sync it up, that's a lot of holes for them to suddenly have to worry about all at once. Here's another example of that using just HIBANA and not having a Thermite paired with it. You can still simultaneously set off multiple charges to create a lot of different angles of fire for defenders to have to worry about. The charges don't go off until you set them off. But nothing says you have to use these 1 per panel. You can actually double up on a pair of these, and this will allow you to cut a hole in a wall that will now be a vaultable surface depending on your height. This is a little bit bigger than a sledge hole, and as you can see, we can move through this quickly and pretty easily. If you put it down a little lower, you can even just crouch walk through it without having to do the vault. It should be noted, if you use a single charge down at floor level, you can see through it, but you can't actually crawl through it. You're blocked somehow. I have had it glitch where it lets me through once or twice, but it seems really inconsistent at best. And while I did manage to actually crawl through one of these holes once, it only happened one time in comparison to dozens of other times where I tried and it wouldn't let me through. So I wouldn't really depend on the ability to do that. If you want, you can set off all 3 of these at once, and then you get a hole that's comparable to Thermite's charge, and you can just walk or run straight through that hole. Now, you will use up all of your charges for a single breaching point. This is also very effective at busting reinforced trapdoors, and you don't even need all of your charges to do so. So I'm just going to fire on the edge of this trapdoor here and illustrate that you don't need a lot of these to punch your way through. In fact, you can get away with just putting 1 on here, but in this example we'll have 2. But as long as there's even just a single charge on here, you'll cut through the door. By offsetting the charge and making it so that the rest of the pellets actually strike outside of the trapdoor, you'll create a secondary explosion that'll take out a chunk of the floor with it. And while it's not necessarily the biggest piece, it will give you just that much more of a hole to shoot down through on vulnerable defenders. So here we're going to do a speed test comparison to see who's faster to be able to cut through a wall. We're going to sync these up and set them both off at the same time to see who's faster. And as you can see, Thermite is very much the quicker of the two. So if you're trying to go for a synchronized breach between the 2 characters, I would set off HIBANA's charges first, and then about halfway through, go ahead and detonate Thermite's charge to sync it up as close as you can. So what happens if somebody's on the other side of the wall? Well, unfortunately not much. Here I'm pressed up against this wall as tight as I can get, and I've only received 27 damage. I was directly in front of that detonation when it went off. Now, Thermite's charge will actually kill you if you're on the other side of it. So that's a much greater reduction. You can also do some damage by physically striking somebody with the projectiles themselves, although it's not much at all. Direct hit only gives me 4 points of damage on that, and we tested that a few times and it was 4 points consistently. The range on the launcher is pretty much whatever you need it to be. We're pretty far away from this wall, and we still hit the exact spot we were aiming at, and we're able to set off the detonation no problem. So range is not really any kind of significant limitation here. And while the charges do spread out from their single point of emission from the barrel into the 2 rows by 3, oddly enough, the further out they go, they don't like spread out more or anything like that. Of course, you don't have to use them just for breaching reinforced walls. You can put them, for instance, on castle barricades if you wanted to. They'll also work on any breachable surface. It doesn't have to be reinforced. So wooden floors, walls, or barricades are also all fair game. One thing that will not respond to HIBANA's special charges are the deployable shields. And this is a point of departure from Ash's breaching launcher. Her launcher will take out the deployable shields. HIBANA's will not. They'll just bounce off and nothing will happen. Now, if you do put these on a non-reinforced surface, you can actually shoot them out from the other side. So here I'm going to illustrate that when you see the charges coming through, you can kind of hit them and take them out. But here we were able to cut a 6-charge hole down to a 2-charge hole. When used on metal reinforced walls, though, you cannot do it. It doesn't matter how much you shoot at it, at what point of the deployment, you cannot breach through and hit those charges on the other side. But when we talk about shooting out these pellets, that might even be something that you want to do as an attacker. Using this technique, you can actually wind up shaping the kind of charge that you wind up getting. You don't have to be stuck with this rectangular hole composed of 2 rows of 3 of these charges. In this example, we're going to set up a narrow line on one side and more of a square hole on the other and see what that gets us. So this is more useful if you want to control the shape of the hole that you're making to keep yourself more protected depending on what you're doing. For instance, this square hole could be very useful if you have a shield operator here. You could put him right in front of that hole and he wouldn't necessarily be able to get hit from the side of it since it's not as wide. This narrow hole is really great because when you're firing in, that's really all you need, and it makes it a little less likely that you'll get shot back. And it's really great for an operator like a Blackbeard or somebody whose shield would really do a great job of filling that hole. Speaking of Blackbeard, he'll make a really great combo with HIBANA. When the charge goes off, he'll be able to plug that hole up nice and fire into the room. Here's an example of a shield operator I was discussing a moment ago, and Blitz is able to use that hole to protect himself and still set off his flash charges to disorient the defender in the other room. Another good combo for HIBANA is an operator like Glaz. Now this isn't necessarily the best example, we were just down in the basement and just did a kind of a quick illustration here. This would actually be more useful for like exterior shell breaches with reinforced walls and pairing up with Glaz. But as you can see, when you make the hole in the wall, Glaz is able to fire through there and stay further back and still be protected. Once you blow the wall away, he'll have that great line of sight to do whatever it is that he wants to do to get those shots off. So what kind of counters does HIBANA have? Well, since it is a projectile launcher, we wanted to see if Jaeger ADS units would shoot out the charges. And the ADS unit does take them out, but it only takes out 2 of the 6. Besides, how often are the ADS units located outside of the objective anyway? Probably not the most effective counter. But what does make a really good counter is Mute's jammers. So when you try to hit a wall that has a signal jammer on it, it won't do anything. You cannot set that off. Another key difference is that while Thermite can go and pick his charge back up off the wall and try it again, she can't. Those pellets are attached to the wall, you cannot get them back. One tip you can do is if you want to make sure a wall isn't signal jammed before you shoot it, go ahead and throw your drone against the wall first. If it gets jammed, then you know that that's not a wall you should try to breach. Bandit batteries will also make a wall that's unbreachable for HIBANA. If she fires at a wall that's been electrically charged, they'll just disappear on contact. They're all gone right away. But what about the infamous Bandit trick? Well, this is kind of a complicated question. It depends on how you do it. If Bandit puts his battery down the moment he hears the metal discs impact the wall, he might be able to get it off in time. However, if Bandit waits until he actually sees the charges begin to detonate, he cannot put them down fast enough. He reacted the moment that he could, and he's actually able to stand up and back away from it. There's enough time, but it doesn't stop it from going off. So the Bandit trick doesn't work in that case, but it will if they haven't been set off before he puts the battery down. HIBANA's kind of an interesting operator. She mixes the roles of Thermite and Ash in such a way that she can be an effective breacher, but still fast and aggressive as she hits multiple sites simultaneously. Combining HIBANA and Thermite can literally leave the defensive reinforcements in pieces. But even on her own, she makes a great alternative to Thermite. Now tomorrow I'll be doing a full operator profile workup for Echo, as well as the next piece in the math walkthrough series. Now if you want to stay up to date on that and other Rainbow Six Siege news, tips, tricks, information, and more, then please like and subscribe. You can also follow me over at IcyCat25 on either Facebook or Twitter. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.